Good afternoon, children. So, last class we have started with our digestion and absorption of lipids. Hope you have understood what we have taken, what we have discussed. If you have got any doubts regarding the digestion of lipids in the oral cavity or in the gastric cavity, please do ask me. Then only I can come to know about it. Okay. So we have, I'll summarize it once again. So you know that lipids are fat soluble compounds or they're hydrophobic in nature, and because of the same reason, it's too tough to perform the digestion because the lipids are insoluble in the blood and all, and again the enzymes responsible for carrying out the digestion are also usually proteins, and they are hydrophilic in nature. They are having a tendency, they are polar in nature. They will be having a tendency to act on those substrates which are polar in nature. But lipids being non-polar, it's too tedious, or it take time for them to carry out their function, right? So that's why the digestion of lipids is a time consuming process when compared to that of a carbohydrate or a protein digestion. Okay, so those enzymes which are responsible for carrying out the digestion of lipids, we collectively call them as lipases, right? And as you know that the diet contains a large amount of lipids, right? And the lipids mainly present in the dietary sources are the 95% of the dietary lipids are constituted by a compound known as triacyl glycerol, TGs. Then a small percentage, the remaining 5% is composed of cholesterol, which can be free cholesterol or cholesterol esters, again phospholipids like lecithin, cephalin, etc. Then again lecithin is the most prominent one. Then comes the free fatty acids. Okay, so these are the other types of lipids which can be present in the diet. So now we are going to discuss how they are being digested by the different classes of lipid digesting enzymes or lipases. Okay, so we have already discussed what's happening in the oral cavity and also in the gastric cavity, right? So what is happening in the oral cavity? In the oral cavity, the dorsal surface of the tongue contain a class of lipases which are known as lingual lipase. Lingual lipase performs the digestion of short chain fatty acids, and the dietary source which contains the short chain fatty acid is mainly milk fat. So the milk fat will be initiating the digestion in the oral cavity itself with the help of lingual lipases. Right now, after the action of the lingual lipase, what happens? This fat containing food will be taken into the stomach, where they will be encountering with the second type of lipase which are known as gastric lipases. So what does gastric lipase do? For the gastric lipase to perform their function, it should meet certain conditions. That is, the gastric lipases are having their optimal activity at alkaline pH, but since the food is now present in the gastric cavity, the stomach is rich in HCl. So in order to bring about their actions, the gastric lipases cannot function as in the case of dorsal, in the case of lingual lipase, right? So even the comparatively alkaline medium is being provided by the calcium ions, or the gastric cavity can carry out the function only with the help of the presence of calcium ions, etc. Clear. So the gastric lipases again carries out the continuation of the fats which are made up of short chain fatty acids, or the lipids which are made up of short chain fatty acids. That is, again, example is the milk, etc. Right? Egg proteins. The lipid contents present in the egg yolk, etc. Right? So only the short chain fatty acids, that is those fatty acids which are having a chain length between 2 to 5. അത്രയും വരെയുള്ളവരുടെ മാത്രം ഡൈജഷനെ ആർക്ക് carry out ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ, can be carried out by the lingual lipases and the gastric lipases. Clear? So next is what is happening. So after the digestion of lipids by the lingual lipase and the gastric lipase, now you know that only very minute quantities of short chain fatty acids will be digested by the the lingual lipase and the gastric lipase, right? So see, being hydrophobic, now they will be present in the form of an unstable emulsion, right? The lipids are highly insoluble in nature, അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ വളരെ unstable ആയിട്ടാണ് നിൽക്കുന്നത്, right? Once the action of gastric lipase is over, the gastric lipase action they becomes an unstable emulsion. So in the stomach, the food is present in the form of a highly unstable emulsion. Now this highly unstable emulsion will be now pushed into the small intestine, right? And again, the peculiarity of fats is that the fat will be repelled, or they will be restricted from moving towards the small intestine by a hormone which is known as enterogastron. They are a class of hormones, and the function of this enterogastron is to inhibit the flow of fat into the small intestine. So the fat-rich food will be remaining in the stomach itself in the form of unstable emulsion. So this make the person to feel that he's not having any feeling for eating food, more and more food, once the fat-rich food is taken. Clear? And hence fat is said to be having a high satiety value. ഭയങ്കര highly satiable ആയിട്ട്, ഭയങ്കര എന്താ പറയാ, നല്ല ഒരു ഫുഡ്, നല്ല തൃപ്തി വരും, നല്ല നമുക്കിങ്ങനെ വയറ് നിറഞ്ഞ ഒരു ഫീലിംഗ് ആയിരിക്കും. യെസ്, ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് ഇറ്റ്. അതാണ് വയറ് നിറഞ്ഞ ഒരു ഫീൽ, നല്ല സംപ്ഷ്യസ് ആയിരിക്കും നമ്മള് fat rich ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഫുഡ് കഴിച്ചത്, because of the action of the hormone known as enterogastron. It makes the fat restricted to move into the small intestine. അതേസമയം carbohydrates ഒക്കെ ആണെങ്കിൽ gastric cavity they will be immediately removed from the stomach, and they will be immediately reaching the small intestine, and the pancreatic amylase will be taking action. Right? But in case of lipids, what is happening? The gastric lipases, of course, carries out the digestion of small chain fatty acids. But at the same time, now the hormone come into action, which is known as enterogastron, which prevents the movement or the mobility of fat from the stomach for a long time, right? Making the person to have a sumptuous feel. To have a sumptuous, term use a sumptuous, വയറ് നിറഞ്ഞ ഒരു അവസ്ഥയായിരിക്കും നമുക്ക്. കുറെ നേരത്തേക്ക് നമുക്ക് ഈ ഇര വിഴുങ്ങിയോണം കിടക്കുക എന്നൊക്കെ പറയില്ലേ, ഈ നല്ലോണം എണ്ണയുള്ള ഫുഡൊക്കെ കഴിച്ചാൽ കുറെ നേരത്തേക്ക് നിങ്ങളൊന്ന് കഴിച്ചു നോക്കിയൊക്കെ, രാവിലത്തെ നേരം പൂരിയൊക്കെ നല്ലോണം കഴിച്ചു വെച്ചോളും. കോളേജിൽ വരുമ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് യു വിൽ ബി ഫീലിംഗ് സ്ലീപ്പി. കാരണം എന്താ വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ the body is trying to digest the oil that is present in the puri, പക്ഷെ the body is not having. അപ്പൊ അത് സമയം സ്റ്റൊമക്കിൽ എന്താണ്, enterogastron ഇങ്ങനെ ഫംഗ്ഷൻ ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. It prevents the food to move into the small intestine, to descend down into the small intestine. Clear? So that's why it is said that the fat is having a high satiety value, right? And this food now present in the stomach will be in the form of a highly unstable emulsion. Emulsion എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമുക്കറിയാലോ, it's a colloidal form, right? ഒരു lipid in water, അതിനെയാണ് we called as emulsions, right? So അതൊരു highly unstable emulsion ആയിട്ട് തന്നെ അങ്ങനെ കിടക്കാം. നമ്മൾ ഈ വെളിച്ചെണ്ണയൊക്കെ വെള്ളത്തിന് വീണാൽ എന്താ ഉണ്ടാവുക, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വെള്ളത്തിന്റെ മേളിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ കുറച്ച് വെളിച്ചെണ്ണ വെച്ചാൽ എന്താ ഉണ്ടാവുക, അത് highly unstable ആയിരിക്കും. It is remaining undissolved. ആ ഒരു ഫോമിലാണ് it's now present in the gastric cavity, in the stomach. Right? So this emulsion, what happens to this emulsion? ഈ emulsion ഇങ്ങനെ തന്നെ വലിയ വലിയ fat droplets ആയിട്ട് ഇരുന്ന് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ intestinal പോയാലും it will take more and more time to carry out the digestion. Even if the pancreatic lipases are highly potent in nature, വളരെ powerful ആണെങ്കിൽ കൂടി the process becomes more and more hard or more and more tough, because they are present in the form of highly unstable emulsion. ഇങ്ങനെ വഴുക്കി പോയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കും. നമുക്ക് വെളിച്ചെണ്ണയിൽ തൊട്ട് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമുക്ക് തൊടാൻ പറ്റുമോ? ഇല്ല, അവരങ്ങ് നീങ്ങിപ്പോവും, ഇല്ലേ? അപ്പം ഈ എൻസൈം എന്താണ്, എൻസൈംസ് ഒക്കെ പോളാർ ആണ്. ക്ലിയർ? അപ്പൊ ഈ പോളാർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള സാധനത്തിന് നോൺ പോളാർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള സാധനത്തിന് എപ്പോഴും തൊടാൻ പറ്റില്ല. അത് തൊടുമ്പോഴേക്ക് അങ്ങ് വഴുക്കി പോവും, സ്ലിപ്പായി പോവും. അപ്പൊ എന്ത് വേണം? ഇറ്റ് ഹാസ് ടു ബി മെയ്ഡ് സ്റ്റേബിൾ. ക്ലിയർ? പ്രയർ ടു ദ enzymes to act in the small intestine. Right? If a small intestine the digestion continue ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് there is another step, an extra step is needed in the case of the digestion of lipids, and this step is carried out by making the unstable emulsion into a comparatively stable form. Completely unstable form ആയിട്ടുള്ള വലിയ വലിയ fat droplets ആണ് ഇപ്പോൾ ഉള്ളത്. ആ fat droplets നെ ഒക്കെ നമുക്കൊരു stable formലേക്ക് it is now converted. Right? അപ്പം this emulsion is now made stable, and this stability is attained by the action of a group of compounds which are known as emulsifiers or detergents. I think we have stopped our discussion, right? So next, after the digestion of the lipids in the gastric cavity, now what happens? The emulsifying agents comes into action prior to the action of pancreatic lipases. So ആദ്യം lingual lipase വന്നു, oral cavity digestion start ചെയ്തു, gastric cavity etti, our digestion of small chain fatty acids will be continued, right? And after that, what happens? Now the food is now descended down into the small intestine. Small intestine lara varia carbohydrates padicha adeypole thanne, right? Appo amylase, salivary amylase kanyu, gastric amylase kanyu. Now comes the pancreatic amylase in case of carbohydrates. Appo in case of lipids la endha varia? Lingual lipase vannu, gastric lipase vannu. Next comes the pancreatic lipase, and pancreatic lipase is very much powerful, and it is the pancreatic lipase which is carries out the most important part of the digestion of lipids. Apparthum pancreatic amylase ആണ് എല്ലാ കോംപ്ലക്സ് മോളിക്യൂൾസിനെയും ഡൈസാക്രൈഡ് ഫോമിലേക്ക് മാറ്റിയിരുന്നത് അല്ലെ. ഡൈസാക്രൈഡ്സിന് പിന്നീട് അവർ മോണോസാക്രൈഡ്സ് ആയിട്ട് മാറ്റും, റൈറ്റ്. അപ്പൊ സിംപ്ലർ ഫോമിലേക്ക് മാറ്റുന്ന പാൻക്രിയാറ്റിക് ജ്യൂസിലുള്ള എൻസൈംസ് ആണ്. ഇൻ ദ കേസ് ഓഫ് ലിപ്പിഡ്സ് ഓൾസോ ദ ലിപ്പിഡ് ഡൈജഷൻ ഇസ് ആക്റ്റീവ്ലി ഹാപ്പനിങ് ഇൻ ദ സ്മോൾ ഇന്റസ്റ്റൈൻ with the help of pancreatic lipases. പക്ഷേ pancreatic lipase function ചെയ്യണമെങ്കിൽ ആദ്യം എന്ത് വേണം? Prior to the action of the pancreatic lipases, one more event has to take place, and that event is that what is happening? These highly insoluble bigger fat droplets, which is now in the form of emulsions, has to be now made into their soluble form, right? And this is carried out by emulsifiers, and the emulsifiers or the detergents that are present in the body is known as the bile salts. So the emulsification is carried out by the bile salts. So from where does we get the bile salt? The bile salt is obtained from bile, right? Bile and when the this ഈ അൺസ്റ്റേബിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള എമൽഷനെ നമ്മൾ വിളിക്കുന്ന പേരാണ് ആസിഡ് കൈം, ACIDCHYME. So this highly unstable emulsion which is now moving from the gastric cavity down into the small intestine, സ്റ്റൊമക്ക് സ്മോൾ ഇന്റസ്റ്റൈനിലേക്ക് ഡിസെൻഡ് ചെയ്ത് വരണം ആ ഹൈലി അൺസ്റ്റേബിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആ എമൽഷനെ വിളിക്കുന്ന പേരാണ് ആസിഡ് കൈം. Clear? So once the acid chyme start entering into the small intestine, the intestine will be getting the stimulus. That എന്താണ് സ്റ്റിമുലസ് കിട്ടിയത്? ആസിഡ് കൈം എത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. Clear? They are being informed that the acid chyme has entered into the small intestine. ഈ സ്റ്റിമുലസ് കിട്ടിക്കഴിയുമ്പോൾ what happens? The bile duct start producing the bile juice or bile produce ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങും. And major constituent of bile is the bile salts. Clear? അപ്പം bile salt അല്ലെങ്കിൽ bile release ചെയ്യണം. Bile duct releases the bile only when the acid chyme enters into the small intestine, upper part of the small intestine. Small intestine upper portion എത്തിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഉടനെ the bile duct will be stimulated to produce bile or to secrete bile into the small intestine. Clear? At the same time, the pancreatic duct also will be stimulated, so that what happens? The pancreatic juice is also secreted. So these are the events which are happening in the upper part of the small intestine when the acid chyme enters into the small intestine. Clear? So the small intestine will be producing pancreatic juice or will be having the pancreatic juice and bile in it only when the acid chyme enters into it. So only when the acid chyme causes the stimulation of the small intestine, then only it informs the bile duct and also the pancreas to secrete the corresponding secretions. Appo bile duct ne endu information pass ചെയ്യും? bile കൊണ്ടുവന്നോളൂ, ബൈലിനെ തന്നോളൂ എന്ന് പറയും. അതേപോലെ പാൻക്രിയാറ്റിക് ഡക്റ്റിനോടും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പാൻക്രിയാസിനോടും ആര് പറയും? സ്മോൾ ഇൻറ്റസ്റ്റൈൻ ഗിവ്സ് ദ ഇൻഫർമേഷൻ ടു release or to secrete the pancreatic juice. So how do they inform? എങ്ങനെയാണ് small intestine information കൊടുക്കുക? Again, the small intestine is having certain hormones in it. The small intestine releases when the acid chyme enters into the small intestine. What happens? Certain types of hormones, right, will be released. There are pancreatic the gastrointestinal hormones are released into the into the corresponding glands like pancreas and also the bile duct. So which are the different types of hormones? Different types of hormones are there. കാരണം ഈ pancreatic juice ആണെങ്കിലും comparatively ഒരു alkaline medium വേണം in order to perform their function. അപ്പം pancreatic juice release ചെയ്യണം. ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു the small intestine gives the information to pancreas and also the bile duct to secrete the bile and also the pancreatic juice. So how do they pass the information? The information is passed with the help of a group of gastrointestinal hormones. Gastrointestinal hormones, GI hormones, will be carrying out the function of passing the information to the pancreas and also to the bile duct. Clear? So, which are the different types of hormones? One hormone is secretin. One of the gastrointestinal hormones